So we're going to be covering so much ground today. We're going to be covering so many topics. We're going to be talking about Satan. We're going to be talking about the fall of the angels in eons past or ages past and the effect that that has had on the earth today. We're going to be talking about the seventh king that nobody talks about. The seventh king, I believe, is the rider on the white horse, and I'll help you make those connections there. And we're also going to be talking about God's secret weapon. I hope you'll stick around. This is going to be a really fascinating Bible study today. So I do have show notes, and I hope you'll get a copy of these. The link for the PDF is in the description box below. So I'm basically just going to be reading through my notes here today. And I want to thank my friend in France who sort of tipped me off that this was a direction that I might want to go in. So the first thing I want to do is actually look in the book of Revelation where Satan is going to appear on a timeline, not necessarily where we first see him appearing in the book of Revelation, but where in a timeline Satan appears. And remember, the book of Revelation is not written in chronological order. So when the Revelation 12 sign happened in September of 2017, it sort of acted to me as a neon sign that pointed to the book of Revelation, to Revelation chapter 12, and really that we're to start any examination of the end times with Revelation 12. We see in Revelation 12 a dragon, 7 heads, 10 horns, and he is Satan. That's what we read later on in chapter 12, that the dragon is Satan. He's that serpent that Michael and his angels are going to eventually cast to the earth. But before Satan gets thrown to the earth on a permanent basis, he is actually going to place himself on earth. He's going to stand before the woman. The woman is Israel. He's going to stand before Israel while she's in travail. That is, that she's experiencing an invasion or a war. And he is not the instigator. That is, Satan is not the instigator of this war. He is standing before the woman while she is in travail. Something is going on. There's some invasion. I think it's the Gog-Magog invasion that's happening first. But Satan is going to be on the earth. Okay, that's what it means that Satan stands before the woman. Now, his goal in standing before the woman is not to do anything to Israel or to the woman, not yet anyway. His goal is to wait for that child to be born and then basically try to eliminate the effectiveness of this child that's born. To devour is to fight or to have a war with or to engage someone, just like Satan prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. It's this warfare that's going to be happening, directed primarily at believers who have been transformed from mortal to immortal. And that's his focus, is not the woman, but on believers who have been changed. Now, there's going to be a time period of about 7 days where Satan is going to try to devour the child, and believers will experience a time of warfare. But on the 8th day, that's when this child will be presented to God in his throne room. So Satan is not directly involved with what's happening with Israel. And even before Satan tries to devour the child, he's going to actually cast a third of his angels, a third of the stars, of his stars. He doesn't control any of God's angels, but he's going to take a third of his angels and cast them to the earth to assist him on earth and leave 2/3 in heaven. Okay, so Satan still has his angels in heaven. He hasn't been cast out yet. He has been removed from his position, but he hasn't actually been removed from heaven or from the heavenly places. So after this war or invasion, Satan is going to remain on the earth. He'll come and go, but I think he's primarily going to have his focus here on the earth. He knows later he's going to have to be in heaven to war with Michael, but in the beginning, his focus is on the earth and getting things set up for his fake son, the Antichrist, the beast of Revelation. Right now, Satan has access to the earth, of course, and he also has access to heaven. He is the prince of this world, but even still, he still shows up in heaven. He accuses God's people before the throne of God day and night. and he is still doing that to this very day. Just before the time of the abomination of desolation, Satan is going to be cast out of heaven. He's going to be thrown to the earth and eliminated from heaven permanently, both he and his angels, and they will never go back again. But for the first part of this time of trouble that we're going to be looking at, Satan actually can come and go back and forth, earth and heaven. During the last days, Satan is going to set up a throne on the earth. And Satan's throne or Satan's seat is mentioned in the letter to the church of Pergamum. And Satan is going to rule from Jerusalem. I believe Pergamum symbolically represents Jerusalem. We'll look at that in just a minute. If you want to know more about that, take a look at my video on the letter to the church of Pergamum. I'll leave a link to that in the description box below. Pergamum actually means tower or fortress. In Daniel 11:38, the man who we identify as the Antichrist worships the god of fortresses. Satan is the god of towers and fortresses, whether it's the Tower of Babel or whether it's a fortress like the city of Jerusalem, which we know was a fortress. In fact, they thought it was impregnable till David captured it. And just as a refresher, a reminder, Satan can only rule through people. He has to use people. So even though Satan may have a throne that he establishes on the earth, he has to put a person there. It's a space for a person to be there that he will rule through. Dominion of the earth was given to man. It was not given to angels. During the last days, Satan is going to rule through this individual who will later become the beast from the sea or the beast from the bottomless pit, however you want to call him. He's the man that we know of as the Antichrist. So this man, this beast, is going to die. And once he resurrects from the dead, he's going to be indwelt by Apollyon. Apollyon is not Satan. Apollyon is one of those watchers who's been placed in the pit in chains. He's the king of the angels of the bottomless pit, meaning he's the worst of the very worst. He is so bad that he is kept in chains in the pit and is going to be released at the fifth trumpet. Satan still can go to and fro, but Apollyon was so awful, he's put in the pit. Satan's rule eventually is going to be transferred from the harlot elites that we see in the world right now. This is the system of control that he's been using since the Tower of Babel. And there's coming a day when Satan is no longer going to be using the harlot. Okay, he's going to toss her aside. He's going to toss her under the bus. Satan's been using thousands of people throughout the ages, throughout time. Actually, it's probably in the millions of people that he's been working through and operating through. There's coming a day when this is not going to be the case anymore, and he's not going to be working through a whole lot of people. He's going to be working through this one man, his false son, the seed of the serpent. So the Antichrist is going to die and resurrect and mimic the death and resurrection of Christ. And he's even going to die in the same day that Jesus died on Passover and rise from the dead on first fruits. And the Antichrist is going to deceive people into believing that he's the Christ because of these counterfeit signs and lying wonders. So I remember in the video in the church to Philadelphia, we talked about how Jesus has the keys of David and how he also has the keys to death and Hades. So he is the one, Jesus is the one who is allowing the beast to both die and to be resurrected again. This does not come about as a result of Satan's power or anything like that. Jesus is in control of all of that. So the rider on the white horse, I believe, is also the seventh king that will die and come back as the eighth king. We read about the seventh and eighth kings in Revelation chapter 17. A lot of people don't really pay any attention to this chapter, and they for sure usually don't equate the seventh king with the rider on the white horse. But I think that these two entities are one and the same. The rider on the white horse receives a crown, which means he becomes a king. We know that the harlot is going to sit on the seven mountains, which are seven kings. And then there's going to be an eighth king who is one of those seven, but she does not sit on 8 mountains. She sits on 7. So she is not going to have dominion over that eighth king. That eighth king is the Antichrist who rises from the dead. The rider on the white horse is not a spirit, it's a person. The rider on the white horse is a counterfeit Jesus Christ who also comes riding on a white horse in Revelation 19. The rider on the white horse is not symbolic of believers or Christians going out conquering the world for Christ. It's not symbolic of a certain illness. The white horse rider is the counterfeit of Jesus Christ. He's the antithesis of the real white horse rider, who is Jesus Christ, who will come and have the victory over the beast and the false prophet when he returns. Now, when we're first introduced to the rider on the white horse in Revelation 6, okay, it's important to note he already has a bow. Nobody gives him a bow. He has a bow. And by the way, if you have a bow, you also have arrows. It's assumed that they go together. It's not like, you have to say, oh, he had a gun and bullets, or he had a gun and rounds. No, if you have a gun, it's assumed you have bullets. You're always to assume it's loaded, right? So the rider on the white horse already has a bow. He's a warrior. He is already a participant in whatever conflict has been going on. He's a warrior. And there's coming a time when the rider on the white horse will be permitted to go from warrior status to warrior king. And remember, Christ is our warrior king. He's the one who fights the battles for us and who will fight the battle at Armageddon. He may receive a crown because of his exploits, whatever it is that he's been doing, or whatever is attributed to him as having been doing. And remember, Israel is at war. Then the child is born. Believers are transformed from mortal to immortal. The eighth day, they're taken into heaven in a rapture where they're glorified. And it's on that day, the same day that they're taken into heaven, that the seals 1 through 4, I believe, are opened. And also trumpets 1 through 4 are going to be blown on the exact same day. Revelation chapter 8, starting, I think, with verses 2 and following, connects that scene before the altar of incense where the elders are offering golden bowls of incense, which in chapter 8 then the angel takes and offers with more incense on the golden altar, and then the 4 angels that blow trumpets do their trumpet thing. Now, if the war that Israel is experiencing is the Gog-Magog war, God is going to initiate that war by putting a hook in the jaw of that, I think it's a Russian, Persia, perhaps Turkey alliance, and bring them down into the land of Israel. And God is the one who is also going to end that war. But Satan takes God's things and pretends like they're his own. And so he will probably use the end of that war as an opportunity to give credit for the end of that war to this rider on the white horse. And this person will then be elevated to the status of a king, I believe the 7th king of Revelation 17. And Satan will most likely rule through this individual from Jerusalem and begin to persecute Christians at that same time, but not persecute the Jews, okay, the synagogue of Satan, who are actually a part of that harlot system. Okay, so we're not talking about a beast system yet, or a beast kingdom. We're talking about the 7th king, who is himself underneath the harlot. The harlot is going to ride, be on top of all 7 of those mountains, all 7 of the kings. And I believe the 7th king is going to appear to be friendly with this harlot system and Israel. And by the way, Israel is also a part of the harlot or mystery Babylon at this present time. It's part of that system. Now, both the 7th king, the rider on the white horse, and the harlot, they both hate Christians. And they will both persecute Christians, perhaps making an agreement with each other, Israel with this, making agreement with the 7th king, that Israel will be precluded from any kind of persecution, that Israel will be kept safe, that this is maybe the covenant of death that Isaiah 28 talks about. So Satan will also be present in heaven some of the time, accusing the brethren before God day and night before the golden altar. So he's not going to be on earth the whole time. And he will be in heaven when the war in heaven breaks out with Michael. Satan may actually choose to indwell this seventh king, the rider on the white horse, from time to time. He doesn't have to indwell him all the time. He doesn't have to take a permanent residence inside of him. For example, Satan entered into Judas on the night that Judas betrayed Christ. Satan didn't live inside of Judas. He didn't possess him permanently, but he did go enter into him, and then he left him. So it's possible for Satan to actually go into this person and indwell him from time to time. Satan may possess the seventh king, the rider on the white horse, and also be the one who orchestrates his coronation. So we're not told who actually crowns this king. We're just told he's permitted to wear a crown. And I think it's going to be Satan who actually authorizes the coronation of the seventh king and will bring about the establishment of his throne, the seat of Satan, the throne that's in Jerusalem, represented by the city of Pergamum. So once the white horse rider, the seventh king, dies and resurrects as the eighth king, the beast who rises from the sea, and remember in Revelation, the sea can also mean death, the place where dead people go. Apollyon will at that time actually enter into the beast. Apollyon will be released. The fifth trumpet will have already blown. And it's this hybrid entity that is going to make up the beast. Remember, the beast is a man. He has the number of a man, 666, but he's a Superman. He's going to be indwelt by Apollyon. He's going to be a hybrid. So this false resurrection is another counterfeit connection between the seventh king, the rider on the white horse, and Christ, who rose from the dead and who's coming back as the rider on the white horse, wearing many diadems. So the beast, not Satan, is going to rule for 42 months. Okay, Satan is going to give the beast his power, his throne, and his great authority. And this is a counterfeit of how God the Father gives Christ a crown, his throne, and his great authority, that Christ can rule on earth. Okay, and Christ actually has the authority to do whatever he sees is the right thing to do. So it's sort of like Potiphar in the Old Testament. When Joseph was in command, Potiphar didn't worry about anything except what he was going to have for dinner. So he left it all to Joseph to rule. Satan is going to leave everything to the beast to take care of, to Apollyon, who is more than capable of ruining the world. And God the Father is going to leave the kingdom, the millennial kingdom, to Christ to rule as Christ sees fit. And of course, he'll rule in accordance with God the Father. So during that last 42 months, Satan is not really the one who's in control. Satan gives his power, his throne, and his authority to his son, the beast. Now, let's talk about how Satan is involved in king making. The 7 horns on the dragon's head, which we read about in Revelation 12, represent 7 kingdoms and 7 kings that Satan has basically been responsible for pushing forward onto the world stage, particularly with regard to animosity toward Israel and God's people. In the past, these kings, and there were 6 of them, have been controlled by Satan using the harlot system of control, okay, because that's the one that Satan has been using basically since the Tower of Babel. And we know this is true because the harlot is seated on 7 mountains or 7 kingdoms. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain for only a little while. That is the 7th king. When the 7th king arrives, he'll only be here for a little while. 5 kings have fallen. The 6th king was Rome, which was the kingdom that was over Israel at the time John was writing this letter. The beast that was and now is not is an 8th king who belongs to the other 7 and is going to destruction. And the harlot is going to control that 7th king, but only for a little while, okay? And when that king dies, She will no longer control him. We know that the seventh king is the rider on the white horse who will be given a crown. The harlot will control this king for a short while until his death. Revelation 17:18 says, "The woman that you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth." So the harlot rules over the seventh king, but she also rules over all the kings of the earth. Satan, together with the harlot, has ruled over mankind and their kings since the time of Babel, that great city. Babel or Babylon has spread its influence over the whole earth, over nations and languages, the very nations and languages that came about as a result of the upheaval at the time of the Tower of Babel. So the whole earth is now Babel or Babylon. The city has spread like a terrible illness. All the values of that city, Babylon, has spread over the whole earth. And just like at the time of Babel, when God looked at the city and actually came down and looked at it and said that if something isn't done to basically mitigate this problem, nothing that these people want to do will be impossible for them. So that's when God confused the languages. But the world is in a state now where there really isn't the same kind of confusion of languages. We all can communicate with one another. Of all the kingdoms that have existed on the earth, there are 7 kingdoms that are particularly satanic in their origin. John's told that 5 of those 7 kingdoms existed prior to his day. One that was Rome, and that a 7th would come into existence during the last days. And all of these kingdoms would be under the control of the harlot, who is under the control of Satan. There would also be an 8th king whom the harlot does not control. There are not 8 mountains, only 7, upon which the woman sits. By the time the beast or the 8th king begins to reign, the harlot will no longer be in power. That's because at the 6th trumpet, the harlot is going to be destroyed by fire, smoke, and sulfur on a single hour, day, month, and year. Revelation describes 7 satanic kings who will arise from among mankind. 4 of those kings are mentioned in Daniel 7. Daniel 7 verses 2, 3, and 17. Daniel declared, "In my vision in the night I looked, and suddenly the 4 winds of heaven were churning up the great sea. Then 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, each one different from the others. These 4 great beasts are 4 kings who will arise from the earth." Notice it doesn't say 4 kingdoms who will arise from the earth. It says 4 kings that are going to rise from the earth. There is also another beast who's going to be more powerful than any of the previous beasts or kings. And this is Daniel 7 verses 23 to 25. This is what he said: "The 4th beast is a 4th kingdom that will appear on the earth, different from all the other kingdoms, and it will devour the whole earth and trample it down and crush it. And the 10 horns are 10 kings who will arise from this kingdom, and after them another king, different from the earlier ones." Okay, so this kind of alludes to an 8th king. He's different from the earlier ones. "Will arise and subdue 3 kings. And he will speak out against the Most High and oppress the saints of the Most High, intending to change the appointed times and laws, and the saints will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time." Okay, that time, times, and a half a time is the 42-month reign of the beast. The 4th beast in Daniel's dream is the 7th, soon to become 8th king of Revelation, commonly referred to as the Antichrist, who will reign for 42 months or time, times, and half a time. From an earthly perspective, the 7 heads on the dragon are human kings, but from heaven's perspective, they're beasts. The final satanic king on earth will be the Antichrist, the 4th beast of Daniel's vision, and the 8th king of Revelation 17. The 8th king will be the resurrected 7th king, but the 8th king will rule apart from the control and direction of the harlot, and with the full authority of Satan, who will no longer need to use regular people to rule the world. His son, a resurrected man, 666, now indwelt by Apollyon, will rule the earth in alignment with Satan's desires. So let's take a look now at the Pergamum fortress connection with Jerusalem. Before the beast rules as the 8th king, the Antichrist, Satan will have already made preparations for his rule and carved out a seat or a throne for him in the fortress city symbolically known as Pergamum in Revelation. The meaning of Pergamum is tower or fortress. The name carries the symbolism both in the original harlot city of Babel, known for its tower, and the city of Jerusalem, also a tower or fortified fortress city. Daniel 11:36 through 39 makes reference to the God of this tower or fortress city whom the Antichrist will worship. And the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. He shall prosper till the indignation is accomplished, and for what is decreed shall be done. He shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers, or to the one beloved by women. He shall not pay attention to any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all. He shall honor the God of fortresses instead of these. A God whom his fathers did not know, he shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. He shall deal with the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. Those who acknowledge him he shall load with honor. He shall make them rulers over many, and shall divide the land for a price. This is the Antichrist. He is going to honor his God, his father, Satan, who is the God of fortresses. He's the God of Pergamum. He is the one who will have a seat in Jerusalem. The seventh king is a warrior king. He's armed with a bow before he receives his crown. Revelation 6:1 and 2. Now I watched when the Lamb opened one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures say with a voice of thunder, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. Christ is also a warrior king, coming armed with a sword, not a bow, to conquer his foes. Satan will have already prepared the throne for the seventh king, and Satan may also be the one responsible for giving him the crown, though the timing for all of this, of course, is under God's control. The four winds stirring up the sea that we read about in Daniel, that result in the arrival of the four beasts, the four kings, that Daniel saw in his vision, may be the source of the imagery of the four winds in Revelation 7. The winds most likely represent angels or spirits. The Greek word for wind can be translated as breath or as spirit. And after this I saw four angels standing at the four corners of the earth, holding back the four winds of the earth, that no wind might blow on the earth or sea or against any tree. The winds or spirits may be held back by the four angels, that is, their angels that are on the earth, to delay the arrival of the fourth beast of Daniel 7, who is the seventh king of Revelation, the rider on the white horse. The angels holding back the winds will continue to do so before the sealing of the 144,000 of Israel, before the rapture of the child, the 24 elders, before the first four trumpets, and before the first four seals of Revelation are opened, the seals that result in the four horsemen of the apocalypse coming out. The angels holding back the four winds restrain the arrival of the beast, the seventh king, and the other three horsemen who will accompany him. The four restraining angels may be connected with the four horsemen of Zechariah 1, verses 8 through 11. I saw in the night, and behold, a man riding on a red horse. He was standing among the myrtle trees in the glen, and behind him were red, sorrel, and white horses. Then I said, "What are these, my Lord?" And the angel who talked with me said to me, "I will show you what they are." So the man who was standing among the myrtle trees answered, "These are they whom the Lord has sent to patrol the earth." And they answered the angel of the Lord who was standing among the myrtle trees and said, "We have patrolled the earth, and behold, all the earth remains at rest." The horsemen pictured in Zechariah 1 are described as beings who are responsible for monitoring peace or wars on earth. At the time of Zechariah, the earth was at rest. That is, there were no wars. During the end times, the world will not be at rest. And even now, the four angelic horsemen, God's horsemen, the ones of Zechariah chapter 1, may be partially responsible for restraining the arrival of the beast, seventh king, rider on the white horse, and the three riders that immediately will follow him. So let's talk about the millennium and afterwards, and what Satan is going to be doing at that time. For the last 6,000 years, Satan has ruled over mankind. Ever since Adam fell and Satan became the god of this world, Satan has been in control of the world, using people as his agents. Satan's systematic institutional rule officially began at the time of Babel with Nimrod. Okay, I'm talking about his systematic rule. Okay, he developed an institution and a system that he was going to use for the next 6,000 years or so. And this began with Nimrod, who I believe is probably the first king of the seven kings that the harlot is seated on, those seven heads that's on the dragon. Nimrod was assisted by a group of tower building elites who desired to make a name for themselves, and they began making bricks, or having people make bricks, to build a tower and a city in direct defiance of God's command to spread out over the earth. During the end times, Satan will no longer rule through proxy humans as he's done for thousands of years. He will rule through his son, the seed of the serpent, the person we refer to as the Antichrist, the beast from the sea. He's also the eighth king, and he's going to rule over the earth apart from the harlot. He will rule as a counterfeit Messiah for 42 months. Christ will return to earth as the real warrior king, and he'll cast the beast and the false prophet into the lake of fire, and Satan will be bound in chains and sealed in the pit for the duration of Christ's earthly rule, which will last 1,000 years. After the 1,000 years, Satan will be released, and he will attempt to lead yet another overthrow of the earth. And again, he needs to do this with a man. This time he will use another man, symbolically referred to as Gog, which means prince. And Satan will use this prince in much the same way he used Nimrod and other kings in the past. After Satan gathers together this multitude of people to attack Jerusalem, God will send fire on the multitude and on Gog, and the whole battle will come to an end almost even before it begins. And then Satan will be cast into the lake of fire forever. Okay, that's the millennium. Now I want to talk about something else. This is about satanic hubris, pride, satanic pride, past ages that existed before Genesis chapter 1, and God's secret weapon. I don't know about you, but I often wonder at this pride that Satan has, this hubris, that he thinks that he can beat God, that he thinks that he can actually gain control of the earth and be victorious over Christ at the second coming. I don't know how it is that Satan has that much audacity to believe that, or how he thinks he can challenge God and come out as a winner. The history of humanity only goes back about 6,000 years to Genesis chapter 1 and the let there be light. But the history of fallen angels actually goes back much, much, much further. It goes back eons and eons and ages, belonging to the very distant past of eternity. And we're not told who or what lived in ages past. We do know that Satan and the angels were there, and that they have been around since before the creation of man. In Genesis 1, the earth is described as being without form and void. How did it get this way? This is before God even said, "Let there be light." It says the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the earth. How did this wretched condition of the earth come about? Did it come about as a result of some other horrible cataclysm? Is it possible that Satan had already attempted and accomplished the destruction of the world and its inhabitants in a prior age, seemingly thwarting God's plans for the earth, and thus convincing himself that he could outwit God in this present age? These are just questions that I have. In past eons, Satan may have a track record of seemingly winning when it comes to God's creation and God's goals. But Satan's victory is not going to last forever. And in fact, We don't know how many eons this has been going on, how many ages, how many millions of years this stuff has been happening, but we do know that for however long it's been going on, it is rapidly coming to a close. What Satan doesn't realize is that God has a secret weapon now that he didn't have before, and that is Christ, his son. The man Jesus didn't show up until about 4,000 years after the creation of Adam. Okay, although he was the Son of God before that, but as a man, he did not appear until he appeared as the baby Jesus born in Bethlehem. He came as a human baby, and after he put an end to sin through dying on the cross, he rose from the dead and ascended into heaven and will become the Savior of mankind. Christ will return to the earth at his second coming as the glorious rider on the white horse wearing many diadems. Christ's victorious return to earth will usher in the next age, which is the Millennial Age, when he will subdue the earth and all its inhabitants. After putting all things under his feet during his 1,000-year reign, he will then hand the kingdom to the Father. The seeming defeat of God in ages past and Satan's delusions of continuous victories in this age and in the age to come will finally come to an end because of Christ. God will obtain the victory over all his enemies through his Son, the Lord Jesus. And as believers, we will assist Christ during the millennium and share in his victory in the day of God, that eternal day of the ages to come. All angels and principalities, both good and bad angels, will marvel at the greatness of God's plan through the ages, and that plan involves people who are going to be made in the image of Christ. Ephesians talks about this. Ephesians 1:18 through 22. I ask that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened, so that you may know the hope of his calling, the riches of his glorious inheritance in the saints, and the surpassing greatness of his power to us who believe. These are in accordance with the working of his mighty strength, which he exerted in Christ, when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly realms, far above all rule and authority, power and dominion, and every name that is named, not only in the present age, but also in the one to come. And God put everything under his feet and made him head over everything for the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all. So Christ has been seated at the right hand, far above all rule and authority. And we're talking about not just angels, good ones. We're also talking about powers and principalities and dominions and all of these things that are spiritual in nature, things we can't see. And Satan is a part of all of that too, along with his fallen angels. And Ephesians 3 verses 10 and 11 says that not only is this victory won through Christ, but there is something that as believers, as the church, we're going to be a part of that victory too over Satan and everything he's been doing for eons and eons. His purpose, that is God's purpose, was that now through the church, the manifold wisdom of God should be made known to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly realms, according to the eternal purpose that he accomplished in Christ Jesus our Lord. So the story of the end times is it's the culmination of ages and ages of satanic, what looks like satanic victory over and over again. We don't know how many times, at least one other time. But that was before God the Son became a man and before God created men. And God is going to use his creation, mankind, who are made in the image of Christ, to put an end to the dominion of Satan in the world. Okay, Christ put an end to death, and that allows us to live forever. And we can rule and reign along with Christ, and we are going to be with Christ ruling and reigning, helping him to put everything under his feet so that he can hand it all over to the Father at the end of the millennium. And it's at that time that Satan will finally be thrown into the lake of fire, and that will be that. Death and Hades are going to be thrown into the lake of fire. Nothing will be able to die. No one will ever be able to die again. Death will not be a thing. And mankind will have a new existence on a new earth with believers living in the New Jerusalem, and then anyone else whose name is written in the book of life who is not a believer but who is redeemed. They will live on the new earth as immortal people, eating from the tree of life and drinking from the water of the river of life, which is a representation of the Holy Spirit. So one of the things that I've realized as I've been doing this study in Revelation, everything gets bigger and bigger, and I understand that the purposes of God are far greater than just believers going or being taken in a rapture. That our destiny is gigantic, it's huge, and it's because of Christ. It's because he was willing to come and be born as a baby, to identify with sinful man, to basically die to himself and have a new birth at his baptism where he became one of us, and to be our representative in our place, representative of sinful man, and die in our place and be raised for us. And we get to participate in his life. We've been given the Holy Spirit. We have everything we need to have full and complete victory in this life and in the coming ages. So I hope you've been blessed by this little Bible study. There's a lot more that can be said about all of this, but I've sort of skimmed the surface, and I hope you'll take the time to prayerfully dig deeper into some of the things that I've talked about today. So leave a comment, and we'll see you on another video. Till then, have a blessed day.